Hello, everyone, and welcome to Play It By Ear, the podcast made for students by students, where the more we know, the more you grow. So, how are you guys feeling today about episode 1?
Yeah, I think it's pretty good that we're doing this. I'm a bit scared. First episode. I think we'll get back into the swing of things later on, but it should be good. What do you
Yeah,
think?
I'm excited. I'm ready to have some really interesting conversations with you guys, and hopefully, we learn a lot along the process.
Yeah.
That'll be good. All right. So, the structure of our podcast will be we'll start with section one, which will be headlines, so current medical topics in the news, or something that we might find interesting. Then, section two, we want to go into a little bit of an ethical discussion amongst us, kind of to test ourselves, see how much we know. And then, section three, we want it to be more relaxed and talk about things that we want to talk about, maybe about our lives, and really kind of keeping this diary entry that the podcast was intended to show. So I guess we can start off with the headlines. Chuka, do you want to start?
Yeah, so I've got some really interesting headlines for you guys. Some of the most recent medical innovations that have happened this year, and they've been working on them since last year as well during the pandemic. Of course, because of COVID, a lot of things have been slowed down. So general discoveries and research has been a bit more difficult, but that's not to say that things haven't been going on. So without further ado, we'll go into the headlines. The first being the third person on record having been cured of HIV. A recent blood sample from professional football players has provided evidence to say that headers affect brain activity. And a new multi-purpose on-off switch for inhibiting bacterial growth, helping the advancement of research relating to antibiotic resistance. And that's one Arian's already said that he was pretty interested in, so we may guide the conversation that way later down the line. The next one, a new study identified a molecular culprit responsible for causing damaging levels of cell death and inflammation in the body. And the final one I have for you guys is exercise altering brain chemistry to protect aging synapses. So, out of those headlines, which one sounds the most interesting?
I think we should start with the HIV thing, because third person
Mm-hmm.
on record to be cured by HIV. I think that's a really big thing that we should talk about. I mean, we all know
Mm-hmm.
what HIV has done in terms of not only medically but societally. Like back in the 60s when people associated HIV with a lot of negative connotations and kind of discriminated against people for that behavior. But now things are changing, don't you think?
Oh yeah, 100%. I think it's a really key moment in the whole treatment of HIV, and it'll affect millions of people's lives. I think the new figures are, say, 1.2 million people in the US are currently living with HIV. So the impacts are going to be massive, monumental even.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think so. Let's get straight into it. So for some of our viewers that may not know what HIV is, here's a brief rundown. So HIV stands for human immunodeficiency virus. It's a virus that damages the cells in your immune system and weakens your ability to fight everyday infections and disease.
Hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
discovery of a cure for HIV and AIDS has been notoriously difficult for reasons related to both science and approach. The mechanism of the virus, to give you a scientific rundown, in the body makes it difficult to cure because HIV invades and then commandeers the T cells responsible for defeating it. This means that as your immune system tackles the virus and attempts to wipe it out, the more it does this, the more HIV is able to replicate. And over time, usually many years, without treatment, the virus always seems to come out on top.
Um,
This, Ariane, do you have
yeah.
any comments?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I was thinking about when it comes to HIV is this thing that we've all probably learnt about because of our interviews, is the idea of HIV and uh, pre-exposure therapy, or PrEP, I think it's called, where basically, I think it's a pill that people can take before having intimate intercourse with someone to prevent them getting HIV from whether it is a male or a female. And I think that kind of shows how far science has come just with just one disease. What do you think? No?
Yeah, I think that's really important because we're so much more focused on like preventative medicine now, and that's the kind of path that we need to take. So I think also with the whole curing HIV, that's monumental in itself as well. But the whole aspect of preventative medication, it's really useful for people. So yeah, I think that's the more like one of the more important things to be looking at is how we can prevent these diseases from arising in the first place.
Yeah, yeah, and like you guys have already said, we do need to prevent them, and the whole science behind them is pretty complicated, but we hopefully have simplified it down enough for people to understand. And so,
What I'm a bit thinking about is like, has this cure for HIV been widely shown to people? Do you think, like, I don't think the general person would know about the cure to HIV just by,
Mm.
because I don't think it's
mm,
been advertised that well. I haven't seen it in the news that recently.
yeah,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
no, you are right. I think I've really only been seeing it because of the research and because obviously we're prospective medical students, we're in that area, we're in those sections of the internet where we'll look at new medical innovations and we'll be seeing all of these things. But for the general public and the average person, they probably wouldn't have heard of it,
Mm.
really.
Mm. I
What's the
think I
problem?
noticed that the article was out around like 5 days ago, and the BBC put an article out around 2 days ago.
Mm.
So it is quite new still, I guess. But again, only the people that would be looking in the medical sections of the BBC would notice it. So yeah, I think what like charities and different campaigns work on is kind of raising awareness for stuff like this because you wouldn't know about it unless you were definitely looking in that region.
Mm.
So yeah.
Is that a problem as well? Because to me, it feels like something so important like this, it should be getting as much attention as possible. You know, the media should be drawing as many people to it as they can.
Mm.
But yet, I feel like almost a whole section of people is being cut out of the conversation, and people aren't able to voice their opinions on it. I mean,
Mm.
have it's a new treatment, and because maybe we haven't had a large reaction from people, can we even discuss the ethical nature of it as well? Do we know whether some people will still be in agreement that this treatment should be taken forward to
Mm.
mass distribution or being conducted on many people?
I guess partially I think that's just because of the difficult nature of science. Like we know that science itself is very, it can change throughout its procedure. So with the implementation of a cure for HIV, I don't think media companies would want to jump on that bandwagon straight away for the sake that maybe it might fall through. Again, it's only the third person. I think what would happen in this case is as soon as the NHS decides to prescribe the treatment for HIV and more research is being done where it can be feasible for people, it will become kind of a societal norm, and the idea of the societal disruptions that HIV has provided in the past and currently in some places. I think that will go away because of the treatment. So that's what I'm trying to say. It's not just a medical advancement, but just an advancement for us as a society. I think it's leading towards that idea. What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. No, I completely agree with you. I
Mm.
think everything you said there captures part of the conversation accurately. So moving on to the cure itself, it's the third person on record that's been cured of HIV, the first woman on record to be cured of HIV, the previous two patients being male.
Mm.
And this treatment is a stem cell transplant that used cells from umbilical cord blood. And whereas the other two people cured of HIV both received bone marrow transplants from donors who carried a genetic mutation that blocks the HIV infection.
Mm-hmm.
And so the key differences between the two treatments is that the bone marrow transplant itself the procedure takes quite a heavy toll on the body, both being highly invasive and for some time afterwards, it can continue to have quite a large effect on the body in itself. And both the two male patients that were first treated with this procedure, immune cells from the donors launched an attack against their cells in the patient's body. And this condition is known as graft versus host disease. And following this initial reaction, both men were cured of HIV. So that's for the first treatment.
Yeah.
And the new treatment is that the woman received umbilical cord blood from a baby who had HIV blocking genetic mutation similarly to the bone marrow. However, the cord blood contains a high quantity of hematopoietic stem cells. And so the blood is collected at the baby's time of birth and then donated by the parents. I think, what do you guys think about that? It's a complicated procedure. I've tried to simplify it down a bit. There's still probably some key elements there that maybe some of our listeners wouldn't understand initially, but there's always going to be links in our description when this gets posted on YouTube for people to refer back to and make their own research as well.
Yeah, I think this links really well into what I'm currently studying in school, which is application of genetics, and we just finished the topic. And in that topic, we're talking about a lot about stem cell research and the ethics behind stem cell research, because what it's leading to in terms of genetics is we're fingerprinting everyone. So we'll have the genetic information available for everyone, and hence treatments like this can be more tailored to patients in certain aspects, and other things like genomic sequencing can allow people to figure out diseases and progressions of diseases. I won't go into the science of it, but the idea is, what I'm thinking about right now is kind of, what problems do you think are associated with stem cells in general? And do you think this can be available to everyone? Or is that just completely unethical?
Stem cells especially, I think it's key to mention that because this is umbilical cord stem cells, you don't have the ethical concerns that you may get when you dabble into embryonic stem cells.
Yeah.
And I think that's a key part of this treatment that should hopefully escape quite a lot of the ethical criticism that you can get with stem cell treatments.
Does that mean
Is
we'll
there
have a
anything
platform?
that is...
Sorry.
Oh.
You go.
Is there anything that is new about this umbilical cord stem cells that would be different to embryonic and possibly cause like different ethical issues, would you say?
I think so, because it's quite a new procedure and the research is pretty fresh. I don't think they've had time as of yet to make that comparison in depth.
Yeah.
And maybe if they have, they're still having new findings that are making it difficult to publish. So right now, as is, perhaps this may change by the time we post this podcast. Some of the facts may change, but as of right now, there weren't really comparisons that I could draw upon between embryonic and umbilical cord stem cells.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about the donors? As in, like, do they have to be closer matches? Because I think I did hear something about that. Is that who would be the donors for an umbilical cord stem cell?
Yeah. So in this instance, it was a newborn baby who had a HIV blocking genetic mutation in their DNA, and essentially there would be things like blood matching. First of all, the first key point would be having the HIV blocking genetic mutation, and then I would say afterwards, it does depend on how long after birth the baby's well, how new the umbilical cord is. Like, so the sample that you're taking um, to remove the stem cells from, um, how long before that had the baby been born. Some of the other criteria, though, I think, again, because it's such a new procedure, we can't answer all of these questions as of right now. And I think we'll have to wait in time. It's an exciting thing that's going on in the world of medicine, and hopefully it develops into a widespread cure for many people with HIV.
Yeah. I think that shows as well, like, how fast medicine is just evolving. As, like, we may not know the answers now, but there's obviously going to be so much of debate and conversation that's sparked from this. So we may see new ethical issues arising. We may see the positive light of it. So there's always something to, like, keep looking out for, and that's why, as medics, we have to constantly be researching about, these new medical news that we see.
Yeah, speaking of more medical news, I think we should talk about the multi-purpose on-off switch for inhibiting bacterial growth, helping the advancement of research relating to antibiotic resistance, the key word.
That is something that I know you were really excited about. And I mean, why? From your standpoint, why were you so excited about that? Because it is an exciting development.
I guess personally for me, obviously, right now I'm in year 13, so we just now getting into or finishing our interviews and researching for those. But I think one of the biggest problems that we faced in this decade is antibiotic resistance. I think the World Health Organization themselves put on their top 10 list of what our medical priority should be is tackling antibiotic resistance. And that arises from not only just medical problems, but socioeconomic problems in different low-income areas where overprescription is a big deal. People go to GP practices. Sorry. People go to GP practices expecting...
You did cut out for a bit there.
Yeah, it's okay. It works well on my thing. Overprescription of GP practices. So...
I blame the cows, personally. I think they're the root of many of our problems. That was a play on. I think one of the biggest problems is also the use of antibiotics in the agriculture industry and putting it into our food and how that contributes to our own antibiotic resistance. So a lot of factors that key into this and make it a problem for the near future. But essentially, what this new research, this new multi-purpose on-off switch, if you want to describe it that way, is that so researchers in Lund have discovered an antitoxin mechanism to be able to neutralize hundreds of different toxins and may protect bacteria against virus attacks. The mechanism has been named Panacea, after the Greek goddess of medicine, and this name has been synonymous with universal cure for many years. And the understanding of bacterial toxin and antitoxin mechanisms will be crucial for the future success of so-called phage therapy for the treatment of antibiotics, for the treatment of antibiotic resistance infections. What the researchers say.
Okay.
So the phage therapy itself, what is it? So phage therapy, also called bacteriophage therapy, it uses viruses to treat bacterial infections. Bacterial viruses are called phages or bacteriophages, and they only attack bacteria. And while phages are harmless to people, animals, and plants, bacteriophages are the natural enemies of bacteria. So essentially, you think of it as it's a new alternative to treating bacterial diseases. And if it were to be successful and be able to use on a larger scale, it would solve a lot of our problems that Arian's already brought up about how antibiotic resistance is a growing issue, and
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the metric is, but I think within our lifetime, we're going to see some of the most commercially available antibiotics being ineffective for quite a large number of the population. I say within our lifetime, being maybe within the next 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
And the phage therapy, the main question people may have is that, is it better than antibiotics? And phages, to answer this, phages won't harm any of your cells except for the bacterial cells that they mean to kill. Phage therapy has fewer side effects than antibiotics, but on the other hand, most antibiotics have a wider host range, so they can attack a larger group of bacteria. They're not so specified just to one particular group, meaning that you could come in and there could be some economic downside to this, because if someone were to try and buy a commercially available this commercially available treatment in the future, does that mean they have to go out and buy specific ones for a specific disease? Whereas with antibiotics, you can kind of just, if you know you have a bacterial infection, you can take a antibiotic, for example.
Yeah. I guess this makes me think about what antibiotics actually do, right? There's loads of different types of antibiotics, but the one thing that the NHS kind of focus on is broad spectrum antibiotics, the ones that you're mentioning,
yes.
that talking about that negate a lot of the effects of many bacterial diseases. But what we have right now is kind of focused antibiotics for specific areas, specific bacteria that we know of. And what doctors do, they prescribe the certain antibiotic that they know will help the patient. But what generally happens is the doctor can be wrong from pathology scans, pathology examinations or things. It might come out that the bacteria causing the illness is different. And what happens is the patient inevitably can suffer serious consequences, and the doctor themselves feels kind of this ethical burden that they haven't provided them broad spectrum antibiotics when they could, and that probably would have saved their life or prevented something from getting worse. So as a result of that, doctors end up giving more broad spectrum antibiotics than they need, which is kind of pushing on this idea of antibiotic resistance. It's this inevitable loop that keeps showing up in different aspects of medicine all around the world even, which is why I think it's one of the biggest problems that we have right now.
I think one advantage I could see from using phage therapy would be that there could be possibly less side effects, because if it's more targeted in killing the cells that it needs, or killing the bacteria that it needs to kill, then as opposed to antibiotics, like you said, broad spectrum, which can be used for multiple different conditions, we would see fewer side effects, so therefore it would be more comfortable for the patient, as a lot of the time you may see with people that have antibiotics, they get allergic reactions, and that can be quite an issue for the doctor to handle, as you don't know whether to take them off of antibiotics, as that may promote resistance. So I think this takes away from that sort of risk of having side effects and possibly exacerbating the effect of resistance. So maybe that's something that we could see in the future.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. I think we've talked a lot about the new headlines and innovations. Of course, like I said earlier, all of the headlines that we mentioned at the beginning and we've talked about up to this point in the podcast, you can find links to all the resources we've used during our research in the description at the bottom of this video.
I think we can move on to the ethical scenarios, right? Section 2.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so moving on to our ethical scenarios. So I think one of the most controversial and topical things going on at the moment would be the vaccination scheme and how everyone is interpreting that in terms of reliability and all sorts of new arguments that are coming up in relation to that. And so I've been reading more and more about vaccine hesitancy and how that can arise amongst different groups. So I just wanted to ask you guys, why do we think people have such opposing judgments around a topic that is supposedly factual? And this can range from all sorts of subjects. So what do you guys think about that?
Ryan, do you wanna go first?
Yeah, I mean, a topic that is supposedly factual. So what I'm guessing what you mean is like with science itself, how it's backed by evidence, and how even so it's backed by evidence, people seem to not take the evidence seriously, right? It makes me think of like conspiracy theories in some way. Like some people might believe that certain things about the world and certain things about mankind's achievements have not actually happened because of lack of evidence, which I don't seem to understand that well, because evidence is clearly there. However, I think with vaccines it's different because the evidence that we have, again, I was talking about this earlier, the difficulty of science in itself is that it's not always 100%. There's never 100% in medicine or science.
No.
So I think that's what scares people when it comes to vaccines. What do you think about that, Chuka?
Yeah, I think when it comes to vaccines, my EPQ was actually on to do with vaccinations and the whole issue with the distribution and administration of the COVID-19 vaccine. But what I've gathered so far in my research for it was that one of the leading contributing factors to vaccine hesitancy was race and people's ethnic background, and how that's been affected by systemic racism and other societal factors put in place, and historical events as well. Like, if you take, there are many studies conducted during the coronavirus pandemic last year and year prior, and one of the study that I saw was that 78% of Black ethnic minority people were vaccine hesitant and said that they may not take the COVID-19 vaccine. This was a study done in December of 2020, so right in the peak of the pandemic. Whereas this is compared to 26% of white participants saying that they would take the vaccine. And I think it was interesting to bring up the points of historical events that took place. What are we talking about when we say this? We can relate this back to historical atrocities conducted on Black people, on ethnic minorities by healthcare bodies, which instigate a mistrust within those groups. And these can range from the Tuskegee study to the use of the controversial use of HeLa cells, which came from a Black woman. Now, the Tuskegee study, for some of you that may not know, was a study conducted in the US in 1958, I'm pretty sure, where it had Black men with syphilis, that had syphilis, were told they were going to receive treatment for their disease. But the actual goal of the study was to track the untreated history of syphilis and how it would evolve untreated. But then these Black men weren't informed about this, so while they believed they were receiving treatment for syphilis, they weren't actually receiving any treatment. It was all a placebo. And because of that had massive impacts on their health. Many of them died. It was an atrocity that the US government tried to cover up for many years, and it was only when it came out in the 70s, I believe, that it really got traction and people really realized, actually, hold on, there's a massive problem we have in our healthcare system if we're discriminating against these people in that way. So yeah, I think that's a massive contributing factor to people's vaccine hesitancy if you're coming from an ethnic group.
Mm.
I
I
think.
think that definitely contributes to some form of mistrust in the system, as we call it. And so that's why there's so much of conspiracy that goes around when such topics come to the forefront, as to maybe it's a lie, and people don't believe in the intention behind why they should get the vaccine, for example. And yeah, I think that's one of the main causes, is that there's so much of mistrust and conspiracy, and this can spread quite rapidly, especially through social media. So, what do you guys think about that?
Um, well, on the topic of mistrust, actually, I think
Mm,
something that's important is talking about Boris Johnson, our Prime Minister, and
yeah,
his Downing Street incident with the parties going on during lockdown. And I think the spreading of that news through media sources and social media has also led to that. But I think what's happened because of it is not only mistrust in the Prime Minister himself, but mistrust in the system. Strangely enough, the NHS is also associated with that kind of mistrust, and I think that's leading to less people taking up booster vaccines, and kind of
yeah,
this propagation of coronavirus once again in our
yeah.
midst. So, I mean, do you think social media has like an implication on people taking that?
Yeah, I would definitely bring up a fact about how there was, as we've gone from the first dose of the vaccine to the second dose to the booster, there are fewer and fewer people taking up the second dose and then the booster. So that the number of people taking their doses is going down as it progresses. And I think the reason for that would be that the media portrayed the vaccine to be a monumental cure for the COVID virus, and that it would definitely solve it. We would reach herd immunity. And it came across as a revolutionary design to get rid of the virus completely. And I think that gave people a false impression that through one dose itself, we would be, coming out of this, this time. And so I think the media's portrayal in some ways contributed to this form of misunderstanding, as people thought that they would be cured from the virus straight away. And obviously, we've seen people having reinfection and all these cases, and that definitely in the media has caused. I believe that's caused that in some form, maybe through unintentionally. But I think that would be one form that the media has contributed by sort of displaying the vaccine as revolutionary in some forms, which it in some ways it is. But I think it also gave a false impression that we would be completely solved from this problem.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think. Oh, Aaron, do you have something to add?
No, no, no. You could continue. I'll say after.
Yeah, no. So I think what you said there is exactly right, and I think it should be mentioned as well is that the COVID vaccine and the anticipation surrounding it during 2020, when COVID first started, people were people were like almost begging for a cure, for a way out of
Yeah.
this whole problem, and the vaccine came about at an extremely fast pace. It was almost unprecedented, the speed which they developed the COVID-19 vaccine. Yet I still feel as though the media kind of the media portrays it as something that, how should I put it, is that it's almost as if it's a vaccine that's been around for years and years. So
Mm.
whereas no, it's
Yeah.
still a relatively new vaccine, and I think they forget this in the way they portray it to people, the general public, in the sense that when people, the longer something's been around, the more trust people have in it, and the media hasn't really outlined that. Yeah, the COVID vaccine hasn't been around for. They haven't focused on the fact that it hasn't been around for that long, and because of that, there isn't as much research to do with the long-term effects. But on the other hand, hold on, before you now start getting worried about taking the vaccine, millions and millions of pounds of research and funding has gone into developing this vaccine.
Mm.
Hundred thousands of professionals, professors, scientists have gone into the development of the COVID vaccines that are available right now. It is a trusted vaccine, and you shouldn't really feel afraid to take
Mhm.
it, and I think that's something that they often miss when they're
Yeah.
talking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, I mean, balancing the argument, how skeptical do you think we should be of scientific advancements? Do you think we should be so skeptical in the sense that even if the general population are taking it, we shouldn't bother because we wouldn't know what the effects would be on us? Like, think about the perspective of people who do not take vaccines solely because they're just scared of what's going to happen. I mean, this is talking
Mm.
about what you were saying, Chuka. Like, that's why I want to say, in general form, how skeptical do you think we should be of news coming out of the NHS and things like that?
Hmm.
I think I think the issue with has is that I don't want to say anyone should be skeptical of news coming out of the NHS, because the NHS is one of our most trusted, or should be one of our most trusted sources of information. I mean, you should feel comfortable going to the NHS website and reading the information that's on there and believing it. But at the same time, we do have to say that the NHS is still a government funded body, healthcare body, and that in that sense, some of the government's own agendas may be pushed. Not these will always be at the core in betterment for our society,
Mhm.
but if you do oppose some of these views that the government may have, you may find that some of the information the NHS puts out and some of the things the NHS tells us to do may not align with your own beliefs. And yeah, I wouldn't say people should be skeptical of the NHS, but just know that you may not agree with everything they say, and that's okay. That free speech exists for a
Yeah.
reason. So.
Yeah, and I think we do have to understand that everyone interprets research in their own way. So something that we find to be reliable may not be enough for somebody else, and they may need more reassurance and more, research into that. And I think we need to give people the time to do that, as well as the obvious freedom of choice for them to, be able to feel how they want to feel about this vaccine. But as long as they're looking at the correct sources and not being led down to fake news and other forms of just misinformation, I think we should let people be skeptical if they feel so, but as long as they're looking at the right sources and they trust in this vaccination program based on how they feel about the research, I think that's completely understandable in some ways, because everyone has their own negative experience, or they may have their own fears about the vaccine, and until those fears and concerns are voiced and then reassured, we can't really be enforcing the vaccine upon people. So yeah, it's complete freedom of choice, I think. I think there are some forms of negative experience that has been in recent times that has definitely had an effect on people still. So I'd like to bring up Andrew Wakefield in that sense, as the whole link between the MMR vaccine and autism caused so much of disruption in believing in vaccination programs in general. And I think that's one of the whole conspiracies and beliefs that still carries on into the COVID vaccine. So I think there must be some effect of that still to this day.
Yeah.
I think it also didn't help. Oh no, Aaron.
Oh no.
I think no, you go.
Okay, fine. Yeah, but I was gonna say, there's definitely a conversation to be had about Andrew Wakefield, because you can't talk about vaccines and not talk about vaccine hesitancy and not talk about Andrew Wakefield, because this man who, for our listeners who may not know, he essentially created this research article that falsely linked the MMR vaccine that was a triple dose before measles, mumps and rubella to autism. And it was later found in certain documentaries and other research that he had some financial incentive to create that, because he had I think he had a share in the idea that 3 vaccines should be separate for all 3 diseases. So because of that, he was struck off the register for GMC, and hence now he's become a what Google says is a British activist because of what his works on anti-vaxxing and the idea that he believes that vaccine shouldn't be given to people, not only just the MMR vaccine, which I think is absurd coming from a person who was trained in the field of helping people.
Yeah.
I think he hasn't done a good job to educate people in the sense that doctors should. Anyway, Chuka, sorry.
Yeah, no. So what I was going to say was that I think it didn't help as well. If you take examples like the Johnson & Johnson vaccine in the US, when that was first being rolled out, I can't remember how many million people they had already vaccinated, and all it took was for 3 people to come out to say, or 3 or 4 people, I think, had blood clots after taking the vaccine. They withdrew all of it, and I think that, in my opinion, obviously, you have to go back and continue to research and make sure that you're not putting further people at risk of having blood clots if they take this vaccine. But the way in which they withdrew the vaccine, I think it stirred panic among people in the US, especially because it was almost like you didn't trust your own product that you're putting out. Like you had vaccinated millions of people at this stage, and 3 people had blood clots. And I'm not sure because I didn't really keep up with the story afterwards, because I was focusing mainly on the AstraZeneca and the Oxford vaccines. But it just seems like if they had done it in a more controlled way and also regulated what they were putting out to them, perhaps they wouldn't have stirred such a frenzy among people. Because I was hearing people saying afterwards that, oh, I'm never taking this vaccine. I'll never inject myself with this. I'll die if I take this vaccine. You know, I'll have one of my limbs amputated because I'll have a blood clot. Just things like this being put out on the internet and spread around that just didn't carry any substance, and they weren't factual. So again, I think some certain ways that the media just explodes and just exacerbates certain stories is bad. Is really bad.
I mean, do you think we should shame people? I mean, there's a thing that we have that currently, shaming is not the right word, but like a thing that's going on with people who are vaccinated and directly against people who are not vaccinated, kind of like guilt tripping them into getting the vaccine, saying, "Oh, you're putting us in danger. You're doing this. You're doing that." Yeah.
Shaming the right. I don't know whether shaming is the right, because are we shaming people for not taking the vaccine, or are we shaming them for, because I think not taking the vaccine in itself is just someone expressing their freedom of choice. But then are we shaming them in almost an ignorance of the people that are around them? Because not taking the vaccine, scientific as we know, it will have an adverse effect on the people that are in your household. You're more likely to transmit the virus to them, and in this sense, you could just be seen as selfish and ignorant because you're not really looking after the well-being or general health of the people that are around you. And I don't know whether shaming, should we shame them for that, or it's interesting. It's interesting. What do you think?
It is, like you said, it is to do with the whole freedom of choice, and there's so much of back and forth that we could have around this, is the sense that the anti-vaxxers may be completely against people that are taking the vaccine, and vice versa. And that is something that we are seeing now. Like if you go out in the streets, you'll see a protest of don't get the vaccine, or you'll see a campaign to say get the vaccine. I think even the wording that we say protest and campaign, it just shows like how we're sort of biased in some sense. And again, it's to do with freedom of choice, and just I think there is a lot of shaming that goes around, and we can't really avoid that because of how strongly people believe in their own opinion. And it is harmful in some sense that happens, because again, it causes violence, it causes disbelief, it causes mistrust, and there's so many factors that would exacerbate that. I think inevitably there is shaming, but should there be is a different form of question. I'm not really sure about that.
I'd like to bring this to a personal anecdote that I have. I used to know someone who was strongly against vaccines because they had comorbidities. They felt that the vaccine itself would kind of make it more difficult to prescribe, it would create more side effects for them and hence lead them to death. It would be easier for them to just avoid going outside and avoid getting COVID than to have a vaccine, which I think to some extent is just. It makes sense that they feel that because a lot of people in the news and even the NHS themselves say that having comorbidities will increase your reaction to COVID and the vaccine itself. But what happened through that interaction between me and them was simply just us talking about the vaccine, not kind of debating against it, but just us talking about what the scientific evidence really is and what people are saying around it, and me bringing up people who I'm close to who have comorbidities and their reactions to the vaccine. And I think that's something that we need to address instead of shaming people for them, is education. It's what a really important aspect of not just being a good person, a doctor. Obviously, a doctor themselves, they educate one another and educate society as to how certain vaccines work in order to mitigate certain problems that they have. And I think that's really important that we should do, even through this podcast.
I think it's really beneficial as well that we've identified reasons why people may be against the vaccine, because that's not really something that people look into. It's usually a lot of disregarding in terms of, they don't know what they're talking about, they're against the vaccine. But there are some reasons that could be justified, they could be valid, as we've said, the negative experience or the whole aspect of racial historical events that have occurred. And so as doctors or as future medical students, we should be identifying those reasons and then focusing on education, directing people to the correct sources, and trying to mitigate the effects of misinformation, I think. And so what we've seen really is trying to identify certain pockets of society. So I've read about pop-up vaccine clinics that are in places of certain socioeconomic or ethnic backgrounds. So we've seen pop-up clinics in temples, in mosques, as well as churches, as you're trying to direct yourself towards a certain group that may be more prone to vaccine hesitancy. Another form is just having representation of people from certain backgrounds to voice concerns on behalf of their groups. And I think celebrities as well play a huge role in that. We've seen some celebrities that are from certain ethnic backgrounds coming to the forefront to say, I know that we have these concerns, but this is the research, this is how we should go about it, please get the vaccine. And, promoting that kind of, not advertising, but sort of promotion and, giving the right advice and resources for people to make informed decisions based on valid research. I think that's what's important.
I guess when it comes from a trusted person like a celebrity, it's more likely to be taken up. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I was gonna say it. I think the government, just vaccine rollouts and the schemes surrounding distribution of vaccines should focus a lot in getting in contact with community leaders. People that are trusted within their communities and their areas, and that people will go to. If this person says that the vaccine is safe, the majority of people will listen to them and believe that the vaccine is safe. And if you can target these people, not target, but if you can get these people to promote the vaccine, then you'll make a lot of progress. But briefly, coming back to Ariane about the shaming, I do want to ask, is it that we shame people that don't take the vaccine if they're not willing to accept the consequences of not taking the vaccine? Because in my opinion, I feel like someone not taking the vaccine, as long as they're aware that by not taking the vaccine, you're not going to be able to do this, like say, I know, go on holiday, you're not going to be able to go to a concert, you're not going to be able to do a lot of these things in society now without having a COVID vaccine or a valid reason why you can't take a COVID vaccine. I feel like really, if they're willing to accept that, then they're okay. But then if they're not accepting of that, then maybe you could come in and say that you could shame them potentially.
Yeah, again, it's instead of shaming, it would just be to make them aware of the regulations that are in place as well as the science that's linked to it. So if they were to be against the vaccine, but then still say, well, I should be allowed in a public place, or I should be allowed here even though I don't have a COVID pass, yeah, that's a form of like retaliation that you can't really justify, because there are certain rules in place, they are linked to science, and you have made the choice not to have the vaccine, which is completely fine, as you have that right. But at the same time, you do have to respect the people around you and the rules that we put in place to protect everyone else. And so, yeah, in some ways that could be seen as, that's not justified, and you'd have to direct them to understand why that's not okay. And so, yeah, I think, again, the whole thing with shaming is that you just have to make them aware of why it's just kind of the way it is with the rules that we have in place.
I saw this article yesterday, actually, while researching a little bit. It basically linked game theory. It's a game theory is something that suggests that if you take different routes to a problem, what are the incomes and what are the probabilities of that income happening. And it took a problem that was known as the two prisoners problem. I won't go into it, but I'll put the link in the description, obviously, if you want to reach out to us and talk about it and read about it. But essentially took this problem and applied it to vaccines, what we have right now. And it suggested that financial incentives or incentives towards the vaccine can actually increase the probability of us reaching an area where everyone is vaccinated, and people having vaccines would be societally better for everyone. However, the implications of introducing incentives can be much worse than not having any form of financial incentive. So what I mean by incentive is like what Shuka was saying earlier about holidays. Telling people that they can go on holiday because of their vaccine is technically an incentive in some ways. And I think when it comes to shaming, it shouldn't really be about shaming. It should just be about letting them know, okay, so you won't be able to do these things because you are putting other people at risk because of what your personal opinions, obviously. And I think a lot of people, the problem around it is something that's a big problem, actually, is one or two cases. The minority of people who have very strong opinions about the vaccine outweigh the thoughts of the majority when it comes to people who are not vaccinated. In my eyes, people who are not vaccinated, the majority are people who are simply lack trust, or people who are just confused about the virus. But the minority of people who actively go against news that we put out are the ones that are being represented by the media the most. And I think the media themselves have a say in how they can control how our reactions to certain people like this are. So I think that's a really important thing to cover. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you have a common view, so the majority of people are willing to take the vaccine, as we've seen, the majority of the UK is now taking their second dose of the vaccine, maybe their third. But with that, I feel like when everyone has a common opinion, it's really the opposing opinion that stands out the most, and that's why the voice of one will outweigh the voice of many, and you'll find that it only takes a very small number of highly motivated and strong-willed people to oppose the COVID vaccine and promote their false agenda online to really sway a lot of people to start becoming hesitant to taking the vaccine. Like you said, I mean, on social media is a very powerful tool. And if you look at some of the people promoting the vaccine and the millions of followers and the millions of interactions that they get, it's quite worrying. It's quite worrying that people with this type of reach can misinform so many people.
Exactly. I think we've definitely seen that with sort of the effect that people in power, authority, or a position of influence, the effect that they have on the public opinion is so drastic. So, for example, with the whole Downing Street chaos that we're observing right now, it's causing so much of chaos in everyone's mind about how much can we really trust the the regulations that are being told to us, or the vaccine program itself. It's causing so much of disbelief in that area. So we've seen how some celebrities are promoting the vaccination, and that's having a positive effect in making people more inclined to having the vaccine. At the same time, when we look towards people that should be acting, leading by example, and those very people are not, going by what they say should be happening, that's where we see like the detrimental effects of retaliation, people going against it. And yeah, I think the media, but also people in power, have so much of an effect on the way we think, and that's something that people really need to take care of when analyzing, how we other people's opinions and whether we should get the vaccine. At the same time, I wanted to go back to the whole thing about the financial incentive. So in some countries, there are systems, for example, with like organ donation, where people have the financial incentive where they're technically like being paid to donate their organs, and that leads to an increase in organ donation. Similarly, do you think there should be some sort of financial incentive for having the COVID virus? Because there's a lot of arguments that I've read about that, so I just wanted to know what you guys think.
Having the COVID virus. So, do you mean financial incentive?
Did I say the vaccination?
For the vaccine.
Did I say the vaccine or the virus? I don't know.
I think you said the virus, but
sorry, I meant.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
Sorry about that.
No, so I think the US were discussing this, were they not? Whether it wasn't a large amount of money, but whether in certain states that were
I think they did gift cards.
Yeah, did they?
Yeah. Certain states did gift cards to like restaurants or something.
Yes, yeah. There was like $500 gift cards per town in one state for people that
really?
Wow. So for people that took the vaccine.
I don't know. Would that not generate the people that are willing to take the vaccine? Because it depends when you bring that ruling in. Because if I've already taken the vaccine and I was completely willing and cooperative in taking it, but then a couple of months later, after I've already taken the vaccine, you're now giving out free gift cards to someone else because they didn't want the vaccine initially. I'm going to feel slightly cheated out of that, and I feel like there's some unfair treatment going on. So I don't know. I think if you're going to do that, you'll have to already give it to people that have taken the vaccine already, but then that just increases the costs of that whole scheme. So I don't know how practical that may be.
But also in some ways, I guess someone who's fully against getting a vaccine because of their own reasons would see it as like, oh, this government organization is really trying to get me to get this vaccine. I'm going to oppose it more. I'm going to.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. It could be seen as like almost bribery. Like they may feel like because the government knows that the vaccine isn't good for me, but they want me to believe it is, so they're just gonna sugarcoat it basically with a gift card or something. So that could be a reaction that some people may have.
Yeah.
I think overall incentives don't really work in terms of like monetary values, but I think what the UK has done relatively well, I'd say, controversially, is the idea of like saying that if you have a vaccine, it would be easier for you to go and travel. It would be easier for you to go out and do certain things, which I think is scientifically true. In the sense that the lockdown rules would have been like for people who are at high risk because they don't have a vaccine, and I think that's interesting to note.
It is.
Yeah. I wonder why that financial incentive works in some cases though, because I think I read about it in Iraq, I think, for organ donation. There's a huge increase in the amount of people that opt in for donation because they because they have the financial incentive. I wonder how that really works, because surely it kind of blurs the autonomy of the patient to have a certain procedure carried out. If they know that they're getting money from it, it surely would cloud their judgment, I think. So
Is this organ donation? So how does for the financial incentives for organ donation, how does that work? Is that organ donation prior to the patient's death, prior to the person's death? So if they were to donate their organ, say if it was one of their kidneys.
I think it's to do with the kidneys. So if they're willing to donate a kidney, they'll be paid for it. I think there's some system like that, which I think I'll put a link for people to research into more, because I don't want to go too much into that. But there's some form of financial incentive that happens with people that are willing to donate organs, and I think then that I can't think of how could that work so effectively, because it obviously clouds judgment. It would cause
I think
stir.
at that level, and think about it, if let's say you were living in a low socioeconomic area and you weren't having much income, it was difficult for you to even bring food on the table for your family, you wouldn't think twice to give your organ away in a legal procedure where you can have enough money to fully rebuild your family. And I think that is a problem in itself, as you talked about the autonomy of the patient, but also, are we just using people as harvesting agents?
Yeah, I was going to say, does it not put a value on someone's how should I, not on someone's life, but it almost like we're giving value to humans, and that makes it feel like it's more like how we sell different product. I'm not sure how I don't know how you may sell like some meats, like a certain cut of meat will be more expensive than another cut of meat.
Exactly.
It kind of makes it seem a bit more barbaric, primitive. I'm not sure really. I think it's a funny one, but I think it also, with the organ donation as well, this is what I was asking, is would the person donating the organ have to have died, or would it be while they're still alive? Because when I'm thinking about organ donation and opting in to organ donation, it's organ donation when like say I applied for my provisional driving license some months ago, and one of the questions they asked on there was, if you were to be involved with a car accident and I died, would I be willing to donate my organs? And I won't disclose what I chose, but I think it is interesting, because if I was dead and someone was willing to give my family a monetary some money basically after I died and I donated my organs, if I had opted in, then I'd probably do it, because I'd probably say that my family, depending on the circumstance and their environment, they could probably use the money for very good things. So I'd probably do it. But.
After death, so I mean, I was thinking about that too. Like, usually what happens is, when you die, it says on your donor card whether you're a donor, and your organs are taken with respect, obviously. And I think with this issue, it's kind of taking away insurance, because what we have right now, what you were describing I was thinking right now was, that's basically life insurance, right? If you were to die and your family gets money, that is life insurance. But if that were to happen because of organs, I think what would happen is the idea of insurance would kind of just dissipate. No?
Okay. So I've just brought up the facts so that I don't, I can give proper information. So it says that Iran is the only state in the world that legally permits a market in kidneys from living donors since 1997. The government provides a fixed compensation of $1,200 plus health insurance coverage for 1 year. the donor also receives remuneration from the recipient or from charitable organizations.
1,200.
Mm-hmm.
Or that's quite a lot lower than I would have thought for a kidney. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I personally I feel like human organs, something that it's so life altering. If say a disease is related to kidney failure, if you tally up the total costs on someone's lifetime, I would definitely expect them to go above $1,200. So
I wonder if this whole scheme was to kind of just eradicate the idea of black market organs, because I feel like this would in turn eradicate black market organs. People going to these places to have their organs removed and sold for lower prices. I'm not sure the prices of black market organs don't. but still, I think maybe that's what the intention was, and in the same way it helps them medically. Oh wow.
Okay, so when I'm thinking about that, how does the black market sale of organs differentiate from this new incentive? Like, what makes this new organ donation scheme and these incentives that the government are putting out different to the black market then?
More
is my question.
Managed, I guess, more legal and more sanitary.
You mean in the way that they acquire the organs?
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
It's probably
And
infection prevention is the main factor there, as we don't know under what circumstances kidneys are being removed in the black market. But obviously, if it's legal, it's being carried out by professionals in hygienic conditions. So yeah, I think that's the main factors that probably be safer for the donor.
Yeah.
Wow.
That topic was really interesting.
We've moved from vaccines to black market.
No, thank you for that topic. Is that it with the ethics then?
I guess if there's anything anyone wants to add to summarize.
We talked about all the problems with vaccines that we have right now, including people not taking vaccines and looking at all the sides of that. But then we also talked about how we should manage people who might have adverse opinions on vaccines. And I think what we've touched on very well is the idea that education is very important. And we talked about then somehow we went into organ donation and black market organs, which it's interesting. I think we'll look into that in the future. We can talk about that with more people.
So hopefully you can have a more in-depth conversation about it.
Or if anyone listening can just email us at Medicom Healthcare Society or medicomhealthcaresoc@gmail.com or www.medicomsociety.com.
We'll type it all down below.
So is this stage in the podcast pretty much the after show now?
Yeah, I mean.
So after we've got pretty much all of the science conversations down, so I guess what's going on with you guys? You guys were all preparing for exams. First ones for me are in May. How's everyone feeling?
I'm just right now. This is filmed in February, half term for us, so I think a lot of people are starting to crack down. But me personally, I like to take things a bit slower and relax it for a bit longer until I get to the idea of the exam prep. And I think people around me getting down into their books is something in the back of my mind that I kind of want to keep off because I want to keep my half term to relax. Just something that I'm thinking about. I don't know. What do you think?
It's something that I was talking with Ariane about before we started the podcast. I was saying how this half term felt a lot different to the other holidays I've had. Some of the other holidays I've known going into the holiday, whether it's the time that I have, I'm going to use it to revise or I'm going to use it to relax. I know that outright, but for this one, I really haven't been sure, because each time that I've tried to relax and unwind and recharge, basically, by the end of the day, I still feel anxious, and then it almost feels like I've wasted the day because I'm not relaxed and I still got work to do. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's probably one of those things where it's just getting closer to exams and
Yeah.
anxiety's kind of building up, but
Yeah, I think
hopefully,
linking to what you guys have said, my whole concept of time is like skewed because of how we feel like we've only got like 3 months, 4 months until the exams start to, until we get exams. But then at the same time, that feels like it could go in a couple seconds, and then we're right at exam season. So it's just like I don't know whether I should start with my revision intensely now or wait until Easter, because again, all of these holidays go by really quickly, and my half term's just beginning now, so I'm gonna have to see how I relax and how I revise. But yeah, I don't know how to feel about whether to go straight into revision or chill, because we have had a really difficult year so far, I feel like, with mocks, but also the whole application process, especially in like upper sixth. The application, the interviews, it's really intense. So yeah, it feels like we should have a break, but then at the same time I feel guilty because we have things coming up. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, for me, all of that is still yet to come. So I look forward to doing that. I look forward to doing all of that next year. I don't have the privilege of going through it this year like you guys.
I think in AS I kind of took it very, very relaxed. A lot more relaxed than I should have, because I knew exams weren't happening.
Yeah,
So
that's the only difference between like our year group and your year group, is that we straight away knew exams weren't happening within like a few months, but then you guys, you have to get these exams done. So yeah, but at the same time, I would say in lower sixth, it's more about like gathering experience for like your personal statement and everything that's coming up for you. So yes, you have to prioritize your studies, but at the same time, like do your extra stuff, like with this podcast and everything, because it's fun for you, but at the same time, you're getting experience about your like future career.
No, definitely, 100%. I think it does. You do need to make sure that you keep things that you love and do them regularly, because they will always be outlets for you, especially in times of anxiety and stress. You need something that you'll be able to turn to and know that if you're doing that, then you're going to put your mind at ease for a brief period. Yeah.
It's the whole work-life balance that we always have to like mention in our interviews. We used to always be like, yes, we have resilience, we have the work-life balance. So, because that's so important for being a doctor. Like, you definitely need to know how to multitask, but also at the same time take a step back and just, have some time to yourself.
I wanted to talk about a little bit about Medicom in itself. Like, what do you guys think? What do you guys think will happen to Medicom, or what do you want from it to happen in the future?
I think for now, what we started at Medicom is that we've essentially built a foundation, I think, for something that can be quite big in the future. And this podcast, we do, for people that may not already know that are listening, Medicom, initially, before we started this podcast, we would do monthly events that would take place at the weekend, where groups would come in, they present, they talk about different topics. So the event would have one main theme, say autoimmune diseases, and then groups would then come in presenting on a different autoimmune disease. And it was really informative. It was a nice way for people to practice their presentational and public speaking skills, and also to teach other people about these diseases and increase their wider knowledge for medicine in the future and when they're applying to medical school. But Medicom itself, I think wherever it goes, right now we're on the right path, and whatever new developments, there are some things that are in the works, I know, in the background. So
Yeah, and I think that's something we would have to ask our listeners as well. So if ever anyone wanted to like comment down in our YouTube about what they think we should do in the future, that would be incredibly helpful, because we do have the summer coming up, and you know, as we carry on into university and you know carry on, we always want to come back to Medicom and help people that are trying to get into medical school, because we have our own experiences and tips to give. So we could do that in multiple formats. Like we're trying to do that with this podcast now. We've done it with events in the past. We could do workshops. We could do anything. So yeah, it'll be quite interesting to see what other people's opinion is on that.
I think what makes Medicom so unique as well is what we keep reiterating about it being it's a healthcare society that's been made by students for other students, and who better to understand what current A-level students, maybe GCSE students as well, are going through than people that are in that current situation right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because we should continue to have people that are running Medicom and in the background that are in that situation there in that moment, they'll be able to best relate back to the people we're trying to help. So I think you'll be able to relate to a lot of the things where we discuss and a lot of the things we talk about, and hopefully learn from them as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sorry, I cut you off, Chuka, earlier. What were you gonna say? Do you remember?
What was what were we discussing? I think
We're talking about work-life balance a little bit.
Yeah, we're talking about work-life balance.
Yeah, I think. Oh, yeah. I remember what I was going to say. I was going to say that it really didn't help. One of the things that our school kept saying was like 8 teaching weeks left, and I was talking to Ariane before about this again. Is that I didn't actually realize that what they meant by 8 weeks left is that it was 8 teaching weeks left, and so that we still have a month afterwards of revision. And I was thinking that after those 8 weeks are done, like, exams the next day, but that wasn't actually the case. It was more so that we just got 8 weeks to cover the content, and that put me at ease a lot. And coming back to something I wanted to mention earlier on is that I do think it helps a lot for people to structure out what they need to achieve, and if they can clearly see, so maybe make a list, or I don't know, make a Google Doc, or however you want to write it. Just make sure you write down what you want to achieve and what you know you should be achieving.
Yeah.
I think it helps clear your mind a lot, because for me, I would have a lot of issues during the day thinking about, I need to do this, I need to do that, and then an hour later, I now remember I've got to do something else again, and it kind of just I feel like I'm being overwhelmed with so much stuff I need to get done that I don't feel like I can achieve it. But if I know during the day at the beginning, this is what I need to do, then I think I could better go about doing that, and I would feel more comfortable knowing that, you know, that's all. After that, I'm done.
Are you talking about in the context of like homework, or what are these jobs that you're talking about?
Oh, so I guess for me it would be right now I'm still writing my EPQ, revision, homework, like you said. Then some of the other my own personal things. So basketball practice for me, basketball training, the podcast, preparing for the podcast as well, and getting work experience too, because it hasn't been easy during COVID to get physical work experience in person. I've been able to do some online stuff, and I've got physical work experience prepared and everything. But yeah, it's getting to me a bit. It's getting to me.
Yeah, we definitely found it really hard last year to find work experience. I don't think I managed to get it until very, very, very last minute. And yeah, it's difficult. But yeah, the virtual work experiences are good. But for me, I'd say the ones that I reflected on most would have been my in-person work experiences, because you just get the whole different understanding of like the hospital setting. And at the same time, you understand how much doctors have to do on a day-to-day basis, like walking around the hospitals. You just think, oh my gosh, how many things do they have to tackle at the same time? And like you said, most of the junior doctors I was walking around with, they had their own to-do list of things that I need to make sure I get all of these done. Because I was thinking, how are they not going to forget, like, to do this thing? But yeah, the to-do lists are something that you could carry on with forever and ever, because they're really helpful in medicine.
I guess
Yeah.
with me it's a bit strange. I tend to, especially with something like homework, I tend to do it really quickly on the day I
Mm.
get it generally, and then I don't forget it. I don't think about it later on. And right now, on up there, I have a whiteboard of all dates that I need to think about, like my dentist appointments, my exams, things like that. Um, I guess what I like about the way I do work is that at the current moment in time, I'm only thinking about one thing at a time, and I'm very just focused on that one thing until that's over, until I'm on to the next thing. And
Mm.
I think that's I can see that becoming a problem maybe later on in the future, where I might have to juggle several things. Like, hopefully, I'll be working in a hospital, but also trying to clear my exams, and those two things might clash in my head.
Yeah.
So I'm well aware of what my problems are, but I think right now for A levels, this is working for me really well.
Yeah.
Back in AS, it was a problem with work experience. The same thing I was having with you, that you're having right now. But obviously, I didn't have the stress of exams or the stress of homework that you have to deal with right now, because I knew they weren't coming. I knew I just had to look
Yeah.
at a past
Mm.
paper, and done. That's
Yeah.
Yeah, see, I think these conversations that we can have, talking about the problems that we're all experiencing right now, like I said, I feel like a lot of our listeners right now, if they're at the same stages as us currently, they'd probably be going through the same things. And the solutions that we come up to our own problems, hopefully you guys could also use yourselves, and I'd hope that they solve some of yours as well. And that's pretty much the main mission of
Mm.
this podcast. And it's to inform people, to help people, and to allow everyone to grow together and
Yeah.
become better for our pursuit of a medical career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this acts as a really good support system to know that there are many other people that are going through something similar. And yeah, that doesn't make it any easier, but it's just that we can fall back on each other, look at different experiences, and understand how other people deal with it. So you can find like new coping strategies and new ways to tackle it. So I think that's basically what we're trying to achieve with this podcast, is just know that we're also going through something similar, but if you can listen to how we do it and maybe learn something from that as we continue to learn as well, that's hopefully what we can get at here.
I think that's
One
a
of-
good place to leave it now.
Yeah, I think the first episode, it's been quite long. I don't think
Yeah.
the episodes after this one are going to be as long, but I think it was a good introductory episode to what should be a long podcast in Korea. Is that podcasting career? Or I don't know. I'm not sure.
Legacy.
Hopefully, a lot of episodes to come. Hopefully.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Well, thank you for listening to Play It By Ear. This has been Aryan,
Nimitha?
and Chuka. And
Yeah, that will be improved.
Yeah.
Definitely, 100%.
Yeah.
and we hope to see you again. We'll be releasing podcast episodes quite regularly. We're still trying to get onto the whole organizational aspect of it, but hopefully this will come a lot sooner than you expect. So thank you again for listening, and again, look at the descriptions, ask us questions if you need, and email us if you have any topics. All the emails are on the website, and this recording should be on the website, or we'll look into Spotify or YouTube later on. All right.
Yeah.
Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and join in the conversation. So
Yeah.
yeah,
All right. See you, everyone.
bye.
Bye.